The night shift on Friday is always an adventure, particularly in this part of Detroit, where every second house stands abandoned and every third has been transformed into a drug den. I lazily maneuvered the patrol car through the desolate streets, sipping on my now lukewarm Starbucks coffee. "Mike, check the signal from Oak Street," crackled the dispatcher's voice. 10-4, en route, I replied, turning the vehicle around. The clock read 11:40 p.m. Just over an hour remained in my shift, and I was already daydreaming of a hot shower and the pizza Rachel had promised to order. For the past 3 months, we had been attempting to mend our relationship after I had missed her birthday due to an unexpected surgery. Oak Street greeted me with shattered streetlights and heaps of debris lining the road, a typical sight for this neighborhood. I slowly passed by an abandoned supermarket, illuminating the dark corners with my headlights. Nothing out of the ordinary. A couple of homeless individuals loitering at the entrance, shattered windows. Suddenly, a small figure flickered in the beam of my headlights. A child? At this hour? I halted the car and stepped out, placing my hand on my holster. A habit ingrained from years of service. "Hey, is everything all right?" I shouted, directing my flashlight towards the movement. Silence. Only the wind rustled empty bags across the asphalt. I took a few steps forward and caught sight of movement behind a dumpster. "I'm a police officer. Don't be afraid. I just want to help." A small girl slowly emerged from behind the bin. Good heavens, she looked no older than 8 or 9. She wore a dirty, oversized t-shirt and tattered jeans, clutching a worn teddy bear tightly in her arms. "Help me." Her voice was barely audible. I crouched down, trying to appear less intimidating. "Of course, I'll help you. What's your name? Where are your parents?" Instead of answering, she whispered again, "Help me, please." Something in her eyes made me tense. It was the gaze of a cornered animal. I had seen that look in victims of violence. "Can you tell me what happened? Did someone hurt you?" The girl glanced around nervously and took a tiny step in my direction. In the flashlight's glow, I noticed bruises on her arms. Damn. I reached for my radio. "Dispatcher, this is Brown. I need backup on Oak Street, near the abandoned supermarket. I have a minor here, possibly a victim of violence." "Copy that, Brown. Sending units." The girl flinched at the sound of the radio and stepped back. "Hey, it's all right." I try to speak as gently as possible. "Those are my friends. They're police officers too. They'll come to help us. Are you hungry? I have a chocolate bar in the car." She nodded hesitantly. I slowly retrieved a Snickers from my pocket, which I had bought earlier, and offered it to her. She grabbed the bar but didn't eat it, instead tucking it into her pocket. A typical behavior for children who don't know when they might eat again. There are other kids," she suddenly said, clutching her bear tighter. "Other kids?" I leaned forward. "Where are they? Who is with them?" The girl looked around again, now clearly frightened. "Bad people. They won't let us go." I ran away. I heard the sound of approaching sirens and noticed her tense up. "Don't be afraid. Those are my colleagues. They're good. Let me take you to the car. It's warmer there." 2 patrol cars pulled up. From the first, Sarah Thompson emerged, one of the best detectives in the department. She must have been on the night shift. "Mike, what do you have?" she asked, slowly approaching. "It looks like child trafficking," I replied quietly. "She says there are others." Sarah nodded and knelt beside me. "Hi there, sweetie. I'm Sarah. What's your name?" The girl remained silent, clutching her bear even tighter. "That's all right. No need to be scared," Sarah said softly. "Would you like to sit in the warm car? I have hot tea in a thermos." After a moment's hesitation, the girl nodded. I noticed she was limping slightly. Inside the car, she relaxed a bit. Sarah wrapped her in her jacket and handed her a cup of tea. I took the driver's seat, while Sarah sat beside the girl in the back. "Can you tell us where you ran away from?" Sarah asked. "A big red house there. There's a tall fence." The girl spoke very quietly. "Trains go by nearby." I exchanged glances with Sarah. There was only one such place in the area, a derelict warehouse near the railway tracks. We had long suspected something was amiss there, but we lacked evidence. How many kids are there? I inquired. Many. Maybe 10 or more, she shivered. They make us work, and they hit us if we don't do it well. Damn, I cursed under my breath. Sarah, call in the SWAT team and contact Riley. While Sarah was on the phone with the chief, I tried to reassure the girl. Everything will be all right now. We'll save the other children. No one will hurt you again. Promise? She looked me directly in the eyes for the first time. I promise. 15 minutes later, Chief Riley arrived. By that time, the girl had already dozed off, still clutching her bear. What do we have? Riley asked. I briefly outlined the situation. His expression grew increasingly grim. All right, here's the plan. Get the girl to the hospital for an examination. Sarah, you go with her. Mike, you're with me. We're going to prepare the operation. We need to take these bastards down before they realize one little bird has flown the coop. Sir, I would like to stay with the girl, I said. She trusts me. Riley pondered for a moment. Fine, but as soon as she's examined, she's coming to the station. We need every piece of information she can provide. I gently woke the girl. Hey, sweetheart. We need to take you to the doctor, okay? It's not far. I'll be right there. She tightened her grip on my hand. But the bad people won't find me there? No, I promise, they will never find you again. On the way to the hospital, I called Rachel. It was already past midnight. Darling, are you going to be late? She asked sleepily. Yes, I'm dealing with a serious case. It looks like it will take all night. Is something wrong? I glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl had dozed off again. I'll explain later. I'm sorry about the pizza. It's all right. Just be careful. Of course. I love you. I hung up and sighed. Something told me that this night would change everything. Not just in my life, but in the life of this little girl whose name I didn't even know. In the emergency room, we were already expected. The girl was frightened by the people in white coats and hid behind me. It's all right, I reassured her. They're kind doctors. They just want to make sure you're not hurt. You won't leave, she looked at me pleadingly. No, I'll be right here. The examination revealed what I had feared. Signs of abuse, malnutrition, old scars. The doctor quietly informed me that there were no other signs of violence, and I felt a small sense of relief. Sarah brought clean children's clothes from the hospital supply. The girl changed, but she didn't let go of her bear for a second. You have a lovely bear, Sarah said. How long have you had him? This was my mom's. The girl spoke for the first time about her family. She died. Then Uncle Jim took me to these people. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Now we had a name. Do you know Uncle Jim's last name? She shook her head. That's all right, I said. You've already helped us a lot. Now let's go to the police station. It's safe there, and they'll give you proper food. On the way to the station, I reflected on how unpredictable life can be. Just an hour ago, I had been dreaming of pizza and a shower, and now I was leading an investigation that could become the most significant of my career. For some reason, I felt that this little girl in the back seat would change not only my career but my entire life. Riley was waiting for us at the station. I watched as he organized the SWAT team and called the FBI. This case was clearly beyond the scope of ordinary police work. We'll find you a comfortable place to rest, I told the girl as I led her into the station. And tomorrow we'll talk about everything in more detail, all right? She nodded, not letting go of my hand. And then she quietly said, My name is Grace. This was the beginning of a long story, a story of rescue, hope, and a new life. But at that moment, I didn't yet know that. I simply tightened my grip on her small hand and replied, Nice to meet you, Grace. I'm Michael. It was around 5 in the morning when I finally managed to sit down in my office. Grace was sleeping on the couch in the break room, wrapped in a blanket. Sarah had brought her a pillow and even found another stuffed bear somewhere, but the girl still clutched her worn teddy tightly. Coffee? Sarah placed a cup from the vending machine in front of me. Thanks. What do you think? I think this is a big case, Mike. Child trafficking, forced labor. It could be part of an international network. I rubbed my eyes. Fatigue washed over me in waves, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. We need to find this Uncle Jim. If he's involved in selling his own niece, we're already on it. Sarah opened her laptop. We're checking databases for deceased women over the past 2 years who had children, looking for brothers named James or Jim. Riley entered the office. How's the girl? She's sleeping. The doctors say she's moderately malnourished, with multiple bruises and scrapes. But it could have been worse. The FBI will be here in an hour. We need her testimony before the operation begins. I shook my head. Chief, she just fell asleep. Can't we let her rest? Mike, I understand, but there may be other children. Every hour of delay. Sir, Sarah interrupted, we have a lead. Melissa Thomas died 18 months ago. Cancer. Grace's mother, 9 years old. Brother, James Foster. Address? Last known, Cleveland, Ohio. But he moved away a year ago. I stood up. Let me talk to her. She trusts me. Riley nodded. All right, but remember, time is against us. When I entered the break room, Grace was no longer asleep. She was sitting in the corner of the couch, warily watching the door. Good morning. I sat down beside her. How did you sleep? Okay, she replied quietly. Would you like some breakfast? We have donuts. She nodded uncertainly. I brought donuts and orange juice. Grace cautiously took one donut and tucked it back into her pocket. Hey, you can eat it now, and then have another. We have plenty of food. Really? Really? She slowly pulled out the donut and took a small bite. Then another. Soon, the donut was gone. Grace, we need to talk about the place you ran away from, and about Uncle Jim. She tensed up. You don't have to tell us everything at once, but we really need your help to save the other children. He said it was temporary, she suddenly spoke. That Mom would have wanted this, that it would be better there than in a shelter. I felt a surge of anger boiling inside me. To exploit the memory of a deceased mother to sell a child. And then? I asked gently. Then there was a big house. Red. There were bars on the windows. And other children. We were made to work. Sewing clothes. If you didn't work well, they would hit you. Who hits you, Grace? Mr. Robert. And Mr. James. They are the bosses. And how many adults are there? 4. There's also Mrs. Anna. She brings food. And Tony, he guards us. Sarah peeked into the room. Mike, the feds have arrived. I'll be right there. I turned back to Grace. I need to step out for a moment. Sarah will stay with you, okay? Will you come back? Absolutely. In the conference room, a crowd had gathered. FBI agents, our operatives. Riley, what do we have? Asked Agent Morrison, a stocky man with a military bearing. I relayed everything I had learned from Grace. Sarah added information about the uncle. The warehouse complex on Industrial Drive? Morrison clarified. We checked it 6 months ago. Clean. Then you didn't check it well enough, I retorted. Calm down, Riley interrupted us. What do you propose? We need undercover surveillance, Morrison said. Observe the site, establish their operating hours, and the number of guards. We don't have time for that, I countered. They could discover the girl's disappearance at any moment. And then they'll take the other children and cover their tracks, Riley finished. I agree with Brown. We need to act now. For the next 2 hours, we planned the operation. I periodically stepped out to check on Grace. She was drawing with Sarah and seemed to be calming down a bit. Around 9 in the morning, Rachel called. Mike, are you okay? I'm worried. Yes, everything's fine. Just a complicated case. Are you coming home today? I don't know. Probably not. I'm sorry. A pause hung in the air. I love you, she said. And I love you. I couldn't tell her everything, not over the phone, but I felt that our lives were about to change. Mike, Riley called. It's time to gear up. We're heading out in an hour. I want to say goodbye to Grace. I need to leave for a little while. Sarah will be with you. Are you going there? She paled. To them? Yes. We have to help the other children. They're mean. They have weapons. We do too, I smiled. Don't be afraid. Everything will be all right. Suddenly, she hugged me tightly. Please be careful. I embraced her back, feeling my heart constrict. This little girl had become almost like family to me in just a few hours. I promise. And you promise to behave and listen to Sarah. She nodded. In the locker room, as I donned my bulletproof vest, I pondered how strange life is. Sometimes, a single chance encounter can change everything. It can upend a well-established world, and you can no longer remain the same. Ready? David Harris asked, checking his weapon. Yes, I've fastened the last strap. It's about time to shut this operation down. We stepped out into the parking lot. Grace waved to me from the second-floor window. I waved back and got into the car. Let's go, Riley commanded. The operation had begun. Our 4 unmarked vehicles stopped a block away from the warehouse complex. Morrison was giving final instructions over the radio. Alpha team enters through the main entrance. Beta team goes through the backyard. Gamma team secures the perimeter. I sat in the car with David and Kevin. We were part of Alpha team. Adrenaline surged through my veins, my hands slightly trembling. An ordinary reaction before a raid. Hey, Mike. Kevin patted me on the shoulder. How are you? Fine. Just want to take those bastards down. I get it. When I saw the pictures of that girl in the hospital... Quiet, David interrupted us. We're starting, Morrison signaled. We moved silently toward the complex. Everything was quiet. No movement, just the rusty gates and peeling red paint on the walls. I see one guard at the entrance, Kevin whispered. Yes, it was Tony, the one Grace had mentioned. A big guy with a shotgun. He was smoking, leaning against the wall. On 3, Morrison commanded. 1, 2. FBI. Everyone on the ground. Someone from our team shouted. Tony jerked toward his shotgun, but Kevin had already knocked him down. A brief struggle ensued, and I heard a crunch, probably a broken nose. Clear, Kevin shouted, securing the handcuffs. We burst inside. The first floor was a large room filled with rows of sewing machines. Empty. Second floor, someone yelled. The stairs creaked under our feet. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass echoed from above. Police. Don't move. A gunshot. The sound of shattering glass. Screams. He's got a gun. I slammed my shoulder into the door at the end of the hallway. Inside was a bedroom, clearly the owner's. A man stood by the window, aiming a gun at us. Drop your weapon. On your knees. Go to hell. Another shot. Bullets whizzed past my ear. David reacted instantly. 2 shots to the shoulder and leg. The man collapsed, dropping his gun. Miller is down, David reported over the radio. Medical assistance needed. Fighting continued in other rooms. I heard screams, thuds, and the sound of breaking glass. Clark, the second leader, tried to escape through the fire escape, but Beta team apprehended him. Mike, Kevin called. Come here. I ran toward his voice. What I saw made me freeze. A small room with no windows. 10 bunk beds. On them were children of various ages, from 7 to 13, all thin and frightened. Some were crying. Hey, it's all right. I try to speak calmly. We're the police. We're here to help. Where's Grace? Asked a little girl with red braids. She's safe now, and you will be safe too. A woman in medical scrubs rushed into the room. Everyone needs to be examined. Is anyone injured? The children huddled against the walls, afraid to approach. Hey! I knelt in front of the red-haired girl. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah, this is a good doctor. She will help you. No one will hurt you anymore. Gradually, the children began to approach the medical staff. I stepped out into the hallway. I needed to check the other rooms. Brown. Morrison called. We've got a safe here. In an office on the first floor, we found documents. Lists of children, amounts, names of buyers. A whole network spanning the entire East Coast. Goddamn, Riley cursed as he sifted through the papers. This is international trafficking. We're talking millions of dollars here. I looked at the photographs pinned to the wall. Children of various ages. Some I recognized. They were upstairs. Others, I did not. Where were they now? Chief, I called to Riley. There are records of other warehouses here. I see. I've already passed the information to headquarters. There will be raids across the country. By evening, we were finished. For arrests, Miller, Clark, Tony, and this Anna, who turned out to be Miller's wife. 12 children rescued. Mountains of documents and evidence. I got into the car and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Rachel. Hello? Mike. Thank God. I saw the news. I'm fine. Everything's all right. Is it true? About the children? Yes. Listen, I need to tell you something, but not over the phone. Come home, please. I can't. I need to be at the station. There's a girl. A pause. I understand, Rachel said quietly. Do what you have to do. At the station, Sarah met me. Grace isn't sleeping. She keeps asking about you. I found her in the same break room. She was sitting, hugging her knees. Hi, I sat down beside her. You're back. She smiled for the first time since we met. I promised, didn't I? And you know what? We saved all the children. They're safe now. And Sarah too? Yes, and Sarah too. The bad people won't hurt anyone anymore. She began to cry. Not from sorrow, but from relief. I hugged her, feeling her shoulders tremble. What will happen now? She asked. Now we'll find good families for everyone. Families that will love and take care of you. And can I? She hesitated. Can I stay with you? I froze. It was the question I had both anticipated and feared. You know, I need to talk to someone, my wife, but I really want you to stay with us. Really? Really? Riley appeared in the doorway. Mike, we need to fill out the reports. I'm coming. I stood up. Rest, Grace. I'll be back soon. All night, we filled out paperwork, interrogated the arrested, sorted through documents, but I could only think about one conversation with Rachel, a conversation that would change our lives. I arrived home only at 7 in the morning. Rachel was awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. You look terrible, she said, kissing me. I feel even worse. I collapsed into a chair. We need to talk. About the girl? I looked at her in surprise. I know you, Mike. When you say we need to talk, it's always something serious. I told her everything. About Grace, the warehouse, the other children. About how the girl had asked to stay with us. Rachel was silent, twisting her cup in her hands. We could become her family, I said quietly. Give her a home. Love? Mike, she interrupted. Do you understand that it's not that simple? Adoption, paperwork, background checks, and she's traumatized. She'll need psychological help. I know, but let me finish. I'm not saying no. I'm saying we need to think this through carefully. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Sarah. Mike, we have a problem. Grace, she's having a meltdown. She's demanding you. I'm on my way. I looked at Rachel. I need to go. She stood up. I'll come with you. The station was in chaos. Social workers, psychologists, child welfare representatives. Everyone was trying to sort out the children. Emily Parker, the lead social worker, intersected us at the entrance. It's good you're here. She won't let anyone near her. Grace had curled up in the corner of the break room, hugging her knees. A woman psychologist sat beside her, trying to calm her down. I'm Dr. Lisa Anderson, she introduced herself. It seems the girl is having a panic attack. I sat down next to Grace. Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong? They want to take me to a shelter. She sobbed. No one is going to take you anywhere without your consent. I turned to Rachel. She stepped closer. Hi, Grace. I'm Rachel, Mike's wife. Grace looked at her warily. You know, Rachel continued, sitting beside her, Mike and I think you could live with us, if you want to. Really? Grace shifted her gaze between me and Rachel. Really? But it will take time, and the help of good doctors like Lisa. Will you let her help you? Grace slowly nodded. The following weeks felt like a blur. Endless meetings with psychologists, social workers, and lawyers. Grace lived in a special center, but we visited her every day. Dr. Anderson worked with her daily. Gradually, Grace began to share what she had endured. The sessions were tough. She often cried, sometimes screamed, but it was a necessary step toward healing. She has post-traumatic stress disorder, Lisa explained. That's normal after what she's been through, but she's a strong girl, and she has you. Rachel immersed herself in preparing for the adoption. She read books about traumatized children, attended foster parent courses, and transformed the guest room into a nursery. "Do you think she'll like pink?" she asked, examining paint samples. "Ask her," I suggested. "Let her choose." Grace chose blue. "Like the sky," she said. There was no sky in that house. Gradually, she began to smile. At first rarely, then more often, especially when we came to visit her. "Look what I drew," she would show us her artwork. No more black and red colors. Now there were rainbows, flowers, and the sun. Other children were also recovering. Little Sarah found a family in Ohio. Some were taken in by relatives. For the rest, foster parents were being sought. The case garnered immense media attention. The press and television wanted details. But we shielded the children from excessive scrutiny. They needed time to heal their wounds. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Rachel asked one day. We were sitting in the garden after another visit with Grace. "She'll be okay. We'll help her." "You know," she took my hand, "I've always wanted a daughter. I just didn't think it would happen like this. Life is full of surprises, and some of them are for the better." A month later, Lisa approved for Grace to spend the weekend with us. It was an important test, for her and for us. The first night, she hardly slept. We could hear her moving around the room. In the morning, I found her in the kitchen. She was sitting by the window, watching the sun rise. "Can't sleep?" I sat down beside her. "Just, everything is so new, and I'm scared to dream that I'll wake up and..." "This isn't a dream, Grace. This is your home. If you want it to be." "I want it to be," she snuggled against me. "I really want it." Rachel found us hugging in the kitchen. She silently joined the embrace. In that moment, we all understood. Despite all the challenges, despite the long road ahead, we had already become a family. Papers. Those damn papers everywhere. They had taken over our home. Stacked on the kitchen table, on the coffee table, even in the bedroom. Applications, certificates, permissions, references. I never thought that creating a family would require so much paperwork. "Mike, did you fill out Form 27B? Rachel rummaged through another folder. "Which one?" "The one about financial status, with tax returns for the last 3 years attached." "Oh, that one. Damn, it's still in the car." I stepped out onto the driveway. The July sun blazed mercilessly. In the car, which felt like an oven, I found the necessary folder. On my way back, I waved to Mrs. Johnson, our neighbor. She was watering her ever-present roses. "How's the process going?" she shouted. "Slow but steady. Say hi to the little one." The whole neighborhood already knew about Grace. And, surprisingly, everyone was supportive. Some brought children's clothes, others toys, and Mrs. Johnson baked blueberry muffins for Grace every weekend. "Did you find it?" Rachel didn't even look up from the papers. "Yes." "Listen, can we take a break? My eyes are starting to blur." "We can't. We have a meeting with Jennifer tomorrow. We need to prepare everything." Jennifer White, our adoption lawyer, turned out to be surprisingly humane for a lawyer. She genuinely wanted to help, not just collect a fee. The next morning, we sat in her office, going over our case. "All right, what do we have?" She reviewed the documents. "Income statements, good. Medical reports, excellent. References from work. Mike, there's a problem here." "What other problem could there be?" "Your direct involvement in Grace's rescue case. The commission may see this as a conflict of interest." "That's nonsense. If I hadn't saved her..." "Mike," Rachel squeezed my hand. "Let her finish." "We need additional evaluations," Jennifer continued. "A psychological assessment confirming that your decision to adopt is not a result of emotional upheaval or guilt." "And where am I supposed to get such an assessment?" I have a good specialist. Dr. Ramirez, she specializes in these cases. After the meeting, we headed to the center to see Grace. She was waiting for us in the playroom, drawing something with colored pencils. Dad. Mom. She ran to meet us. Those words, Dad and Mom, she had only recently started using, and each time they took my breath away with excitement. What are you drawing? Rachel sat down beside her. This is our house. Look, here's my room, and the garden, and the swings. Very beautiful. And who are these little people? That's us. And Grandma and Grandpa, and Mrs. Johnson with her roses. I looked at this child's drawing, slightly crooked, with uneven lines, but so sincere. Grace already envisioned us as one family. Meanwhile, we were still battling bureaucracy. How's school going? I asked, trying to distract myself from heavy thoughts. Good. Miss Green said I read better than anyone in class. And I made friends with Emily. She sits with me at the same desk. That's wonderful, sweetheart. In the evening, after her session with the psychologist, Grace looked tired. What did you talk about? I asked cautiously. About Mom, and that time there, and about you and Rachel. And how do you feel? Okay. Dr. Lisa says that talking about the bad things is good, so it doesn't get stuck inside. Wise child. Sometimes she seemed older than her years. The following week brought us a new surprise. The doorbell rang one evening while Grace and I were playing a board game, and Rachel was preparing dinner. At the door stood an elegant woman in her 40s. I'm Helen Thomas, Melissa's sister, Grace's aunt. The ground seemed to vanish beneath my feet. A blood relative. Just what we didn't need. Where have you been all this time? My voice came out sharper than I intended. I live in Europe. I only found out about everything recently from the news. Mike? Who's there? Rachel stepped into the hallway. I want to see Grace, Helen said. I have the right. I'm her only living aunt. No. That quiet but firm voice made us all turn. Grace stood on the stairs, gripping the railing tightly. You're not my family, she continued. Where were you when Mom was dying? Where were you and Uncle Jim when he? She couldn't finish, bursting into tears. Rachel rushed to her and hugged her. Sweetheart, you don't understand, Helen began. I can give you a real home? I already have a real home. In a real family. Go away. Helen tried to say something else, but I blocked her path. You heard her. Leave. After she left, I immediately called Jennifer. This complicates things, she said after I described the situation. Blood relatives have priority rights. But she didn't even know Grace existed until the news. For the court, that may not matter. Prepare for a battle, Mike. I'm sure she'll file for custody. And so it happened. 3 days later, we received official paperwork. Helen Thomas was contesting our right to adopt. What now? Rachel asked in the evening. Now we fight. For every signature, for every permission, for the right to be a family. A new series of evaluations began. Social workers, psychologists, lawyers, all scrutinized our lives under a microscope. How do you plan to balance work with raising a traumatized child? They asked. I'm transitioning to remote work, Rachel replied. And your dangerous profession, Mr. Brown? I've applied for a transfer to the juvenile division. Grace held up well, but I could see how hard it was for her. Every time we left the center, she watched us with such longing. Dad, she said one day, what if the court decides to give me to her? It won't. Do you know why? Why? Because you can say what you want, and the judge has to listen to you. Really? Really? In this case, your voice is the most important. We prepared for court as if for war, gathering references, testimonies, expert opinions. Every evening, we discussed strategy with Jennifer. Helen wasn't idle either. She hired an expensive lawyer, gathered documents proving her financial stability. She tried to meet with Grace, bringing gifts, writing letters. But Grace remained resolute. She thinks she can buy everything, she said one day. But you can't buy a family. A family is when you love someone just because. Wise child. Damn wise. All rise, court is in session, announced the bailiff. I tightly squeezed Grace's hand. The last 6 months had led us to this moment, the final hearing for the adoption case. Rachel held our daughter's hand from the other side. We looked like a real family, because we were, regardless of what the court would say. Judge Pearson, an elderly woman with a perceptive gaze, carefully reviewed the documents. The silence in the room was so profound that we could hear the hum of the air conditioner. "This is the case of the adoption of minor Grace Thomas," the judge began. "An unusual case, I would say." Across the aisle sat Helen with her lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit. She looked impeccable, a fashionable haircut, a designer suit, the typical successful businesswoman. An imposing stack of documents lay on the table in front of her. "Before we begin," the judge continued, "I want to clarify one point. Mr. Brown, do you understand that your involvement in the child's rescue creates a certain conflict of interest?" "Yes, Your Honor," I stood. "It was this case that allowed me to know Grace, to see her strength of spirit, her wisdom and kindness. I didn't just save a child that night, I met my daughter." "I object." Helen's lawyer jumped up. "My client is the only blood relative of the child. Officer Brown is emotionally involved in this case, which may distort his judgment." "Objection overruled." The judge rapped her gavel. "Mr. Brown, please continue." "Over these months, Grace has become part of our family, not because we decided so, but because it happened naturally. We loved her, and she loved us." I saw Rachel discreetly wiping away tears. Grace sat between us, tightly gripping our hands. "Miss Thomas," the judge turned to Helen, "what is your position?" Helen stood, smoothing her perfectly fitted blazer. "Your Honor, I am the only living relative of Grace, the sister of her late mother. I have the means to provide the child with everything she needs: top schools, travel, development." "And where have you been all this time?" the judge suddenly asked. I live in Europe. I run a company." "I didn't know." "So you only learned about the situation from the news? Months after it happened?" "Yes, but..." "And prior to this, you did not maintain contact with your sister's family?" "We had a complicated relationship." The judge noted something on her papers. "Grace," she gently addressed the girl, "please come forward." Grace hesitantly stood up. I encouragingly squeezed her hand. "Don't be afraid, sweetheart. Just tell us what you want." Grace approached the judge's bench. In her new dress, chosen with Rachel specifically for the court, she looked quite grown up. "I want to stay with Mike and Rachel." Her voice was quiet but firm. They are real." "What do you mean by real?" "When I have nightmares, they hug me. When I'm scared, they tell me everything will be all right, and I believe them. They don't pretend that nothing bad happened. They help me deal with it." The room fell silent. "And Aunt Helen? Don't you want to get to know her better?" Grace shook her head. "She only came after the news, when it was really bad. She wasn't there." I saw Helen pale. "Your Honor," she suddenly said, standing up, "may I speak?" The judge nodded. I withdraw my petition for custody." A whisper rippled through the courtroom. "Grace is right. I wasn't there when I was needed. And these people, they have given her what I couldn't, a real family." The judge looked intently at Helen, then at us. "Considering all circumstances and, most importantly, the wishes of the child, the court rules to grant the adoption petition. From now on, Grace officially becomes Grace Brown." Grace rushed to us. We embraced right there in the courtroom, crying, this time from happiness. After the hearing, Helen approached us. Can I visit her sometimes?" I looked at Grace. She nodded. "Sometimes is okay." At home, we were greeted with a surprise. My parents and colleagues had thrown a real celebration. "Now you're officially my granddaughter," my mom hugged Grace. "And I can finally give you this." She handed over an antique silver chain with a pendant. "This has been passed down in our family from mother to daughter," she explained. "Now it's yours." "Thank you, Grandma." In the evening, when the guests had left, we sat in the garden. Grace had fallen asleep between us on the garden swing. "You know," Rachel said, "a year ago, I couldn't have imagined everything would change like this. Do you regret it?" Not for a second. She has made us a real family. The following days were filled with pleasant busyness. Grace officially moved in with us, settling into her room and adjusting to the new routine. At school, Miss Ashley Green warmly welcomed the news. "You have an amazing daughter, so brave and intelligent." Grace quickly made friends with the neighborhood children, especially with Emmy, Mrs. Johnson's daughter. They were the same age and both loved to read. "Dad," Grace called one evening as I was tucking her in, "can we plant roses in the garden, like Mrs. Johnson has?" "Of course. Any kind you want." "Yellow." Mom loved yellow roses. Every evening before bed, she would take out a photograph of her mother. We didn't forbid it. Instead, we often talked about her, recalling the stories Grace shared. "You know," I said one day, "you can love and remember your mom and still be happy in a new family." "Really? Really? There's always room for love in your heart." Rachel now mostly worked from home. I had transferred to the juvenile division. Mostly day shifts, no more night patrols. Helen kept her word. She visited once a month, bringing gifts and sharing stories about Grace's mother. Gradually, Grace began to thaw, though she still remained cautious. The nightmares became less frequent. Now, when Grace woke up in fear, she knew we were there. Always there. "Dad," she said one morning at breakfast, "do you remember that night when I came up to your car?" Of course. I was so scared, but something inside told me, this person will help. And I remember seeing you, small, frightened, with that old teddy bear, and I knew right away, everything would change. And it changed? Yes, sweetheart, it changed for the better. We sat on the back porch, watching as Grace and Rachel planted her first roses. Yellow, just like her mother loved. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of pink. A year ago, I was just a cop doing my job. Now I was a father, a husband, part of a real family. Everything changed that night when a little girl found the courage to ask for help. "What are you thinking about?" Rachel sat down beside me, wiping dirt from her hands. "About how one encounter can change an entire life. For the better?" "For the better." Grace waved to us from the rose bushes. "Mom, Dad, come here. A bud has appeared." We stood up and walked toward her, to our daughter, to our little miracle. This was our happy ending, or rather, a happy beginning.